As bishops from around the world discuss how to reach young people, our next guest says despite the abuse crisis, the church remains a beacon of truth and beauty. Keenan White is a senior at the University of Notre Dame. She's also a fellow at the Center for Ethics and Culture. The center forms students in the Catholic moral and intellectual tradition through teaching, research, and dialogue. Keenan, welcome to the program. I understand you were in Rome witnessing to the Synod and also bearing witness to the Synod. Explain to us what that means.
Absolutely, Wyatt. So unfortunately, there's limited opportunity for direct participation by the youth in the Senate. I know they've selected a handful of youth to represent actually in the conference. But what we've been able to do, my fellow students and I, is attend receptions with bishops and get a chance to interact with them. And so kind of be able to give our input and influence in whatever way we can.
Well, as a faithful Catholic young person, what do you hope to hear from the Synod Fathers at the end of this global church meeting?
I think, speaking for my fellow students, we would just like the church not to compromise truth. There's so much goodness and beauty in the truth of the church and the teachings that the church has. Oftentimes, I think that clerics and teachers of the faith try to talk down to the youth and potentially bring some of the teachings down to their level. That's not the purpose of the truth of the faith. It's not to bring it down to the level that humanity typically operates on. It's to elevate humanity. So I think that the main objective that the youth are hoping will come out of the Synod is that the truth isn't dumbed down for us. We want the fullness of the truth, the fullness of the beauty of the church offered to us by the church leaders.
And that can be a challenge. As you know, some Catholics are calling these dark times in the church due to the scandal, loss of confidence in church leaders. How has all of that impacted you?
Absolutely. So I actually serve as the editor-in-chief of our Catholic paper at Notre Dame. And I think the biggest impact it's had on me is that it's caused me to kind of look with deeper reflection into some of these issues and consider ways that potentially the church may need to reform in order to meet the needs of the youth, but the entire church. Perhaps there are ways that more transparency could ensure that crises like these do not happen in the future.
What's your advice to young people who are struggling to understand the church?
Yeah, I would say my biggest piece of his advice would be to say that the church is so much larger than any one magistrate or cleric. The church is the whole body of Christ. The church is us, the youth, the people. And so we need to take on the role of being leaders in our own church where potentially clerics fail. And so I think that's the advice that I would give to young people is to take on a greater leadership role and look beyond individuals within the church to the greater beauty that the church has to offer, the beauty and the truth and the goodness that are within the church and its traditions and teachings, its foundation. The church has endured crisis after crisis and rebuilt itself over and over again because the church isn't a purely human institution. The church is Christ on earth. And so I think that's my advice is look beyond sort of the crisis of the times and engage with the church in a way that kind of embraces the beauty as opposed to some of the suffering that's going on.
A good piece of advice and a lot of important messages there. Well, I know a lot of our viewers will be praying for you and for fellow students and everyone attending the Synod. Keenan White, senior at the University of Notre Dame, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Wyatt.